The cabin of the plane hummed with quiet chatter as passengers settled in for the long flight. Donald Trump, now serving once again as president, had boarded quietly with a small security detail. Normally, he traveled on Air Force One, but this was a short domestic flight, and he had insisted on surprising people with a more down-to-earth experience. To everyone's astonishment, he chose a regular seat in first class rather than the entire cabin to himself. The seat beside him wasn't empty for long. A man in his late 50s, weathered by years of working outdoors, shuffled down the aisle. His calloused hands clutched a worn leather hat, and his clothes, though clean, bore the marks of a hard-working life. He glanced nervously at his boarding pass, then at Trump, then back at the seat. "That's me," the man muttered softly, pointing to the seat number. Trump smiled politely, stepping aside to let him sit. The farmer settled in, trying to stay composed, but his rough palms fidgeted against his hat. He never thought he'd be seated next to the President of the United States. "Where are you headed?" Trump asked, breaking the ice. "Back home," the farmer replied, his voice heavy. "Montana. Had to meet with some folks about my farm." Trump nodded, sensing the weight behind the man's words around them. Other passengers stole glances, whispering. No one could have predicted that what started as small talk would soon turn into a conversation that left the entire cabin silent. The plane ascended, and the farmer stared out the window for a moment, lost in thought. Trump, accustomed to reading people, leaned back and said, "You seem like a man carrying something heavy. Tell me about your farm." The farmer turned surprised at the question. "Well, Mr. President, it's been in my family for 3 generations. My grandfather broke the soil with his bare hands. My father expanded it. And me? I'm just trying not to lose it." His words carried an ache that caught Trump's attention. "Why would you lose it?" "Drought," the farmer said simply. "Last 3 years haven't given us much rain. The bank doesn't care about weather. They just care about numbers. We're in debt. My wife and I sold half the cattle already. My kids, they're thinking about leaving the farm for good. If they do, the Dawson farm ends with me." Trump sat quietly, uncharacteristically still. He wasn't used to hearing such raw honesty in a world of politics. This wasn't a prepared speech or a calculated angle. It was a man's heart. The farmer glanced around, noticing passengers listening. Embarrassed, he lowered his voice. "Sorry, I didn't mean to unload all that." Trump shook his head. "Don't apologize. You're speaking for a lot of people more than you realize." For the first time, the farmer smiled faintly. It was the beginning of something neither of them expected. Trump shifted in his seat. "You know, people don't always think of me as someone who understands farms, but my mother's father was a farmer in Scotland. Small land, tough life. I remember visiting as a boy. Things weren't easy." The farmer raised an eyebrow, surprised. "I didn't know that." "Most people don't," Trump said with a chuckle. "I grew up in New York City, sure, but I learned early that people who work the land, they're the backbone of everything. Without you, there's no food on the table. Simple as that." The farmer studied Trump's expression, trying to gauge whether these were just political words. But there was sincerity in his tone. "My father used to tell me," the farmer replied, "that when you plant a seed, you're making a promise to the future. Doesn't matter if it's corn or wheat, you're trusting tomorrow to come through." Trump leaned forward. "That's powerful. A promise to the future. I like that." For the first time since boarding, the farmer relaxed. He could feel a strange camaraderie forming. Maybe this wasn't just a conversation between a farmer and a president. It was 2 men sharing roots in hard work and family. Little did they know, the cabin around them was growing quieter. Passengers leaned in, captivated by the unfolding dialogue. The farmer's voice grew softer, tinged with grief. "You know what hurt me the most? Walking into my barn last winter and hearing nothing. No cows lowing, no hay rustling, just silence. My daughter Clara, she cried when we sold her favorite calf. I told her it was for the best, but the truth is it broke me." Trump didn't interrupt. He let the man's words hang in the air. "My father told me once," the farmer continued, "that a barn without animals is just a hollow building. But when it's full, it's alive. Losing that, it's like losing family. Trump exhaled slowly. That's real loss. And yet here you are, still fighting. That says something about you. The farmer chuckled bitterly. Or maybe I'm just too stubborn to quit. Trump smiled faintly. Stubborn is what built America. The farmer turned his gaze back to the window, blinking against the sting in his eyes. He wasn't used to being this vulnerable, especially not with someone of Trump's stature. But somehow the words poured out as if he had been waiting for someone to really listen. The passengers nearby felt the weight of his pain. Even the flight attendants, usually bustling about, paused to listen. What began as casual conversation was quickly turning into something extraordinary. Trump reached for a glass of water, taking a slow sip. I've sat across from world leaders, billionaires, and generals, but what you're saying, this is as important as any meeting I've ever had. The farmer laughed quietly, shaking his head. I doubt that, Mr. President. No, I mean it, Trump insisted. World leaders talk about power. You talk about survival and about feeding people. That matters more than people realize. The farmer tilted his head, studying him. For years, he had seen Trump only through the lens of news reports and speeches. Sitting here, he was seeing something different. A man who listened. Maybe folks like me don't feel heard enough, the farmer admitted. We're out there in the fields before sunrise and after dark. No spotlight, just dirt, sweat, and hope. Trump nodded. And yet, everything starts with you. You're right. We need to hear your voice more. The farmer's lips tightened, emotion threatening to break through. He hadn't expected validation, least of all from the president. For the first time in years, he felt seen around them. The cabin had grown silent, passengers hanging on every word. They weren't just listening to a man and a president. They were listening to the heartbeat of a nation. The farmer sighed, resting his hat on his lap. You know my daughter, Clara? She's 17, smart as a whip. She wants to study agricultural science, figure out ways to help farms survive droughts. But she told me last week, Dad, if we lose the farm, what's the point? It crushed me. Trump leaned in. Sounds like she has vision. That's rare. Vision doesn't pay tuition, the farmer muttered. Trump paused, then replied quietly. But vision changes the world. Don't let her give up. The farmer gave a sad smile. You sound more like a father than a president. Trump chuckled. Well, sometimes that's the same thing. The cabin around them stirred. People weren't just overhearing anymore. They were inspired. The farmer rubbed his temples. My grandfather used to say, take care of the land and it'll take care of you. But lately, I feel like the land has stopped listening. Trump nodded thoughtfully. Maybe the land hasn't stopped. It's waiting for us to be smarter with it. New ideas, new ways, but it always listens. The farmer considered this. Maybe you're right. Maybe I'm too tied to old ways. Trump smiled warmly. Old ways built the foundation. But your daughter's dreams, that's the roof. You need both. The farmer laughed a little lighter. You're full of metaphors today. Trump shrugged. Blame the altitude. Passengers chuckled quietly. The cabin wasn't just listening. They were rooting for this conversation. The farmer's tone grew somber again. We had to sell my wife's wedding ring once just to pay for feed. I bought it back later, but I'll never forget her face that day. She smiled and said, rings can be replaced. Families can't. Trump's expression softened. That's strength. Real strength. The farmer nodded. Sometimes I wonder what keeps her with me. Maybe faith. Maybe just stubborn love. Trump leaned back, looking reflective. That kind of sacrifice. It's worth more than gold. Leaders could learn from that. The farmer chuckled sadly. Don't know about leaders. Just farmers trying to make it through. A woman across the aisle dabbed her eyes with a napkin. The cabin was no longer pretending not to listen. They were part of the story now. The farmer's voice cracked. Sometimes I think maybe I should just give it all up. Sell the land. Let some corporation buy it. At least my kids wouldn't have to carry this weight. Trump shook his head firmly. Don't you dare. Corporations don't love the land you do. And that love, that's what makes the food taste different. The soil grows stronger. That's what makes America strong. The The farmer blinked, startled by the conviction in Trump's words. You think people would even notice if one farm disappears? He asked. Trump leaned closer. They might not notice the farm, but they'll feel the loss because every farm, every seed, every story like yours, it's part of who we are. The farmer swallowed hard, fighting back tears. By now, the plane was quiet, except for the hum of engines. Passengers leaned in their seats, moved by the farmer's struggles and Trump's responses. Even the flight attendant stood nearby listening. The farmer noticed the audience and flushed. Guess I've turned this into a confessional. Trump smiled. Number, you've turned this into a lesson. A man from the back spoke up softly. My father was a farmer, too. Lost everything in the 80s. I wish he'd had someone to talk to like this. The cabin murmured in agreement. Strangers once isolated by their own lives were united by one man's story. The farmer looked around overwhelmed. Didn't mean to start a movement, he said sheepishly. Trump chuckled. Sometimes movements start in the quietest places, even on a plane. Trump folded his hands. You know, people always think politics is about deals and speeches, but sometimes it's just about listening.
What you've told me.
It's worth more than 100 briefings. The farmer smirked. Not sure I believe that. I mean it, Trump said. You remind me why leaders have to keep fighting for people like you. If we forget farmers, we forget the country. The farmer sat back, stunned. Never thought I'd hear that at 30,000 feet, Trump smiled. Life surprises us. Passengers exchanged glances. This wasn't just talk. It felt like history being whispered in the clouds. The farmer hesitated, then reached into his pocket. He pulled out a folded letter worn at the edges. What's that?
Trump asked.
It's for my daughter, the farmer said softly. She wrote it when I left for this trip. Told me to read it if I started losing hope. He unfolded it, his hands trembling. The cabin watched silently as he read, his voice cracked. Dad, if the farm goes, don't think you've failed me. You've already given me everything. Faith, work, love. That's more than land can ever hold. Tears filled his eyes. I couldn't even finish reading it until now. Trump reached over, placing a hand on his shoulder. Your daughter sees you, and that's worth more than any farm. The cabin was silent, moved to tears. The farmer wiped his eyes. Guess I'm not as tough as I thought. Trump shook his head. Toughness isn't never crying. It's standing up again after you do. The farmer chuckled through tears. You've got away with words. Trump leaned back. Maybe. Or maybe your story is just that powerful. A passenger in row 3 spoke up. Sir, I think we all needed to hear this today. The farmer looked around humbled. For the first time in years, his burden felt lighter because it was shared. Trump turned serious. You've given me something today, a reminder. I promise you, I'll do everything I can to make sure farmers like you aren't forgotten. Not just in speeches, but in action. The farmer looked at him skeptically. Promises are easy. Trump nodded. True, but change starts with one, and sometimes one promise leads to more. The farmer studied him. For once, he believed it. The cabin erupted in soft applause, not loud, but heartfelt. The farmer blushed, caught off guard. As the plane cruised, a young woman from economy walked forward. She handed the farmer a small charm on a chain. My grandmother gave me this, she said. She was a farmer, too. I think you should have it. The farmer shook his head. I can't take
this.
But she insisted. It's a reminder that farmers never stand alone. The cabin clapped again, some with tears in their eyes. The farmer clutched the charm tightly, speechless. Trump whispered, See, you're not forgotten. One by one, passengers began sharing their own connections. A man spoke of his uncle's orchard. A woman recalled childhood summers on a dairy farm. A soldier mentioned growing up on wheat fields before enlisting. The farmer listened, stunned. He had walked onto this plane feeling invisible. Now he realized his story was woven into countless others. Trump leaned over. Look at this. You brought people together. That's leadership. The farmer chuckled.
Didn't mean to.
Just told the truth. Trump grinned. The truth is the strongest leadership there is. The farmer cleared his throat. I don't know how to thank you, Mr. President. This talk, it gave me something I thought I lost.
Hope.
Trump patted his shoulder. Don't thank me. Thank yourself. You kept going even when it hurt. That's hope. The farmer smiled, his eyes wet. For the first time in years, he felt lighter. The passengers applauded again, louder this time. The farmer wasn't just a man anymore. He was a symbol of resilience. As the plane began its descent, the farmer looked out the window. The fields below stretched endlessly, golden under the sun. They don't look so hopeless from up here, he murmured. Trump nodded. Sometimes you just need a new perspective. The farmer laughed softly. Maybe that's what this flight gave me. Trump extended his hand. Promise me one thing. Don't give up on the farm. The farmer shook it firmly. I promise. The cabin, once strangers, now felt like family. When the plane touched down, the captain's voice crackled. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for flying with us, and thank you to the gentleman in 4B for reminding us all what resilience means. The cabin erupted in cheers and applause. Passengers stood clapping, some with tears streaming. The farmer flushed crimson, overwhelmed. Trump stood too, raising the farmer's hand like a champion. Ladies and gentlemen, Trump said loudly, this is America. The applause thundered louder, echoing through the cabin. As they left the plane, Trump stopped the farmer at the gate. I'll be in touch. We'll make sure your farm doesn't disappear. But more importantly, I think your daughter Clara has a future we all need. The farmer froze. You'd help her? Trump smiled. Not help, invest. Because voices like hers will save farming. Weeks later, the farmer received a letter. Clara had been offered a scholarship through a new agricultural program Trump announced. At the bottom was a handwritten note. A promise to the future, just like you said. The farmer wept as he read it. His barn wasn't just empty walls anymore. It was a promise reborn. And it all began with a conversation at 30,000 feet.